basically.
How about the fact that we also should ask, even if someone understands the true definition of leadership,
Yes.
does he feel that he has enough stake in the country to want to put his money where his mouth is? Because if I understand what leadership is, and yeah, I understand it, so what? I mean, I don't feel I have a stake in the country. Wouldn't that affect all of that meaning or understanding of the definition of leadership?
Well, that's why definition has got to be contextual. By contextual, you've got to understand where you stand. There are certain foundational things that people need to know in their understanding of leadership. For one, you cannot move. Let me put it this way. There is the intellectual definition and understanding of the definition of leadership. I stand up, and you get that in a lot of classes. Someone gets up and says, a leader is blah, 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 blah. And they're so, I remember I was doing a training program the other day for principals of schools. And I said, what do we think about leadership in Nigeria? And all of them universally said, very poor. And then I said, okay, can we give it some tips? And they started listing leaders that are not committed, leaders that are not dedicated. Then I said, hold on. By leaders, who are we talking about? Let's just be clear. And they said, well, those are the hem of affairs. I said, of what? They said, of anything. I said, okay, does that include schools? And then they said, yes, it does. I said,
it sounded like an afterthought.
Yes, afterthought. And they said, so that means we're talking about you. And all of a sudden, everybody said, well, yeah. Okay, one person then said, yes, it's true.
And then that brings us to the question, of followership.
Yes.
What role does followership have in ensuring that they get, if truly people deserve the kind of leader they get, what is the role of followership in this? Because ultimately, if the followership also understand the question or the issue of leadership, then perhaps they will be able to shape or put in place the kind of leader that they want.
That they will be able to do. But although I have always said I'm not too sure about the people getting leaders they deserve. I think there are many circumstances that lead to people getting leaders they get. Sometimes they're not necessarily what they deserve because if people don't know enough, then they obviously can't. They may get the leader they have earned, but not deserve in terms of what they should get. But dealing with that issue you just raised is this, and it's linked to the issue of that Chamberlain raised about definitions and purpose. I was about to say that when your understanding has got to go beyond intellectual. It's got to get to the point. In fact, I want to say that one of the foundational things that is necessary for proper leadership is an understanding of your capacity to influence your environment. It works both for followership and for leadership. We have a situation where we unconsciously, I've said this before many times, but Nigerians are unfortunately what you call external attributors. That means when something goes wrong in my shop, it's not likely to be because I didn't organize my wares well, and I didn't advertise well, and I didn't put it in a good location. It's more likely because the man next door has a baba down the road who is more powerful than my own baba, and who has ensured that customers do not see my place. That's external attribution. I have no responsibilities for what's going on. Now, the same thing is affecting men who enter leadership and those who are entering followership. Many of those who are in followership have almost this fatalistic approach. I am not responsible for what's going to happen. Therefore, if, for example, we call a party primary now and I want to choose a party leader, because I'm not responsible for what the future will be, I might as well make my own now and put it in my pocket, because that's what affects our definitions. Now, if it affects your definition, it affects your purpose. But if, for example, you had an attitude that says, and that's one of the things I have tried to work on, that wherever I am responsible for influencing that environment. And Brian Tracy has something called the law of synchronicity, which implies that if you set your mind on doing something, ultimately, it's not magic. Somehow, circumstances seem to work in its favor. I only have found out that it's not because circumstances necessarily work in the favor. It's just because you become more sensitive to potentials to move circumstances in its favor. So if you're a follower, for example, you now find yourself, as a youth corporal, for example, I discovered 3 of us were posted to a school. And we fall in the 3 different categories of corpers you get. One of us, as far as he was concerned, came to class whenever he chose. The school, sometimes forgot they had a corper by that name. The second one kept to his classwork only, taught his classes without fail. But when I arrived in the school, the principal said he didn't know they had a couple until I arrived, because I attended the staff meeting, I made suggestions, I became part of a committee, I changed different things. And yet I was just a copper. Now, the attitude that decides that I can change my environment, I can change my society, is an essential one for effective followership and for effective leadership. So if you then define leadership, and then you now take upon yourself the responsibility, that is when your definition is complete. When your definition is, I'm defining Chamberlain, but not me, then I've not defined anything. I'm still in class.
So everybody has a role to play.
Everybody has a role to play. In fact, we actually influence our society more than we know. We influence society in many ways, all of us. We influence society either by our refusal to participate, in which case we pass a message across that non-participation is all right. And you don't know how many people are taking their cue from you. You'll be amazed how many people take their cue from you. Secondly, we influence a society by the actions we take. I overheard Chamberlain talking about people driving on the streets. The level of impatience we manifest on our street influences our society. Let me even give you a simple example. Half of the traffic conditions in Lagos are not caused by the road or by whatever it is. You pass the traffic jam in Lagos and discover there's no logical explanation as to why the road got jammed there. It's just 5 silly, impatient people who felt they were sharper than others and who jumped the gun until they created gridlock. In many countries, they don't have that, because people have discovered that their singular action is going to create a multiplier effect that will lead to all of us being there for 8 hours. Now, if you can't think that far, if you don't think you owe us a responsibility to be well behaved for the rest of us, automatically what we get is what we're getting right now. And you end up having a problem.
The question is, whose duty is it to also reawaken that sort of thinking in the followers? If the followers are that powerful and they're thinking, you know, their long-term thinking would also be beneficial to society, whose responsibility?
I think it's the responsibility of as many people as get to begin to see it. That's why we're here on Channels today, for example. One of the things I have discovered, Margaret Mead said, never doubt the power of a few committed people to change the world. She said, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Can that concept work in Nigeria?
It will.
A few committed people to
A few
change
committed
the
people,
country.
yes.
Even if they are outsiders, not in the corridors of power.
It doesn't make a difference, yes.
How will they break in? I heard people talk about we need this, what's that word they use, critical mass of
Yes.
people in like minds to get in there. Because if one person, for instance, you get into one of those agencies or organizations, God help you if you survive, or your ideas even see the light of day.
Yes. Well, I think the few committed people to change the world ultimately works because they build a critical mass. You see, ultimately, one of our challenges in Nigeria, we have 2 challenges. I've always said this. One of our challenges is our locus of focus. We forget that a nation is like a supertanker. A supertanker does not turn around in one day. If you're driving a supertanker, you're the pilot of an oil supertanker, and you take a decision to turn, it takes that tanker 10 miles to turn because it's a huge mass. And a nation is a huge mass. So it will take a nation a long time to change. But at the same time, those who are committed to it, that's why Margaret Mead's statement was valid, begin a drive in a willingness to change and begin to change the conversation. You know, you'll be amazed. This conversation we're having on Channels has impact beyond what you think it does. I mean, I was flying to Port Abuja one day, I arrived Kaduna, and at the airport, a man walks up to me and calls me completely by name. And I had never seen him before. And he said, every time you come on Channels to talk on leadership, and he was a military brigadier general, a major general, or brigadier general at the time. Every time you come to talk on leadership, he said, I listen. He said, and as soon as whatever you said, I take it whole heart, and when I'm addressing my officers, I repeat it to them. Now, I expect that you wouldn't see a massive change, but you begin to see a 2% change, a 3% change. Initially, that's how in fact, one of the things that we also need to understand is how change occurs. Change occurs actually initially as if it's not happening. It's like a reaction. But the people that are pushing the change keep on creating the masses that are hitting against each other. And then it begins to develop, and we call it internal energy in chemistry. A reaction begins to take place. Suddenly it reaches a level, and it becomes visible to the rest of us outside. That's the only way we're going to ever change the nation. If we wait for someone to take responsibility, no one will necessarily step forward, may. But if we begin to affect people one-on-one level, sharing, you begin to open a few eyes. You begin to open one left, one right. You gradually, what you do is, let me surprise you with something. When America got independence, as at the time of the American War of Independence, there were more Americans on the British side than there were on the American side.